Welcome to Things My Mother Forgot to Mention.
The podcast where we say everything our mothers didn't.
I'm Jan, a trauma therapist and author turned rogue storyteller, here to talk openly about the body, aging, and all the, wait, what? Moments of womanhood.
And I'm Patty, an online business and tech nerd whose purpose is to elevate the voices of women in our world and who doesn't believe in taboo topics. Things My Mother Forgot to Mention is the podcast for every woman who's ever said, wait, why didn't anyone mention this to me?
Join Jan and Patty, two outspoken, curious, outrageous women, as they dive headfirst into a messy, magical, and often WTF realities of aging, health, and quite simply being a woman.
From rogue chin hairs and vaginal thinning
to mental health, perimenopause, and scalp cancer. Yes, really.
Nothing is off limits. It's funny, it's raw, it's real talk your mother definitely skipped.
Let's get into it.
Hi, Jan.
Hey there, Patty.
How's it going?
Well, it's going. A little frustrated with this upgraded computer, information, and but other than that, I'm doing really well. I'm healthy and back from Florida. And last weekend, my son was married, and it was a great wedding. So here I am.
How does it feel being not in the tropics then?
I hate this weather. I came back to New England, and it's like all this snow, which we didn't have. And then, of course, the weather, and it rained, and it was a sleeting time when we drove up here. It was like, oh, I hate being here. So anyway, that's about me.
Well, today,
how are you? Are
I'm
you
good.
doing better? You're in Texas.
Yeah, I'm in Texas. Yeah, it's freaking in the 80s here. So, yeah, like it or not, here I've just let it go. I'm done. I'm just like, okay, apparently we're not getting a winter this year.
You're
So,
in a sleeveless shirt. Look
oh,
at, I'm in a down
yeah.
jacket. We're
Oh,
here
yeah.
bundled. Anyway.
Yeah. But today we have somebody who you have a connection with,
I do.
who as our guest today. And I'm going to read a little bit about Melinda. Melinda Watman is the founder of Weighty Decision, a patient advocacy consultancy partnering with pharmaceutical companies in the anti-obesity medication space. She provides both internal and external shareholders patient-centered frameworks that improve engagement and outcomes. Drawing on 15 years of clinical experience and an MBA-driven entrepreneurial career, she bridges healthcare delivery, policy, and innovation. Ms. Watman is a compelling and trusted voice on the lived experience of obesity, healthcare bias, eating disorders, and patient-centered innovation. In addition to her clinical practice, her background includes founding two successful consulting firms, serving as CEO and co-founder of a medical device company, working with both startups and established organizations to bring novel healthcare technologies to market, and owning a French restaurant. She is a strong believer in giving back and is a mentor with the MIT Venture Mentoring Service and Innovate at BU. She also is an emeritus board member of the Obesity Action Coalition. Holy cow, Melinda.
Exactly.
Thank you
Melinda,
so
I
much for
didn't know
joining
that. That's
us.
impressive. Wow.
Yeah.
I only
Thank
know
you.
Melinda through a good friend of mine, Sue Corber, who was on,
Yeah.
and we talked about anxiety. And then I know her from being at her house. So very, very impressive resume or CV, whatever you want to call it. That's
Thank you.
exciting. I can hardly wait to hear about it, all of it.
Thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. I'm always happy to talk about the things that I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
How did you get so passionate about all this?
well, actually, it came from my lived experience.
Mhm.
I have had obesity since I was 2.5
Mm.
Wow.
and spent most of my life in that world of obesity, dealing with bullying. I remember when I went to kindergarten, my maiden name was Katzman, and the first day of school, the mean kids renamed me Melinda Fatsman.
Right.
And that
Oh,
was my grammar school moniker. And the thing in retrospect, the thing that's most amazing to me is not a teacher, principal, school nurse,
did
nobody
anything.
ever said to those kids, stop it.
Right.
Right.
And, it was just like good, clean fun, make fun of the fat kid.
Hmm.
And, but what's interesting is unconsciously somewhere in there, even as a kid, I made this decision to be an individual just like everyone else, with friends, dressed like everybody else. Not that that was easy. And somewhere found this inner strength. And, you know, sometimes adversity serves you well, and I use that in air quotes, but, you find a space where you can exist and be strong. And so it was like I had two parts of me. There was that part that the world saw, and there was this inner part that was constantly berating myself. How could I not be strong enough? How could I not have enough willpower? How could I not, take it seriously and just not eat? And in my family, food was love, except I wasn't
Yeah.
supposed to eat it.
Right.
Right.
And, and so I couldn't trust what food was.
Right.
Mm.
I couldn't trust that it was love because I wasn't supposed to eat it. I couldn't trust that it was um, a place of happiness. It was Food was destructive for me, and I
Mhm.
couldn't control it. My
Mm.
whole life, I couldn't control it. I had a friend, truly a friend, who, when I was about 40 years old, said to me, well, I don't understand. Why don't you just eat less and exercise more? And I literally smacked my forehead and said to her, God, why didn't I think of that? I mean, I was appalled, and I just thought, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Like, if it were that easy, do you really think that I would be 225 pounds? I don't think so. And
Mhm.
so, people are wired wired to think you're weak, you have no willpower, you should
Right.
be able to control this.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, that is what we are wired to believe.
Right.
Right.
And I grew up also believing that. And therefore, the self-stigmatization was horrific.
The
Right.
shame, right, that
Oh,
you
the
lived with.
shame. Oh my God, the
Exactly.
shame. Absolutely. The
Right.
shame is, just, it's the shame and blame game.
Hmm. And did
And
anyone in your family have the same issue or not? Or is it just,
no,
huh,
I say
interesting.
no. It was interesting. My sisters, so I have two sisters, each are three. So my youngest sister is 6 years apart. My middle sister is 3 years apart, and I'm the oldest. And growing up, neither of them had weight issues.
Mm.
I
Mhm.
also have a brother who's 17 years younger than I am, and growing up, he didn't, and then all of a sudden he did. But
Mm.
Wow.
none of them were like me. And then, as the years went on, both my sisters also gained weight, but nobody had the weight issues I did. And none of them had the imprinting from my mother
Oh,
that
your
Mm.
I
mother.
did, because
Mm-hmm.
I had it from the age of 2.5.
Mm-hmm.
They never did.
Mm-hmm.
So they grew up without this sort of blame and shame and, self-stigmatization
Mm.
that was lifelong.
Mm-hmm.
And only later in life did they end up dealing with it. And interestingly, all three of them are on GLP-1s.
Oh,
Mm.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Interesting.
all three of them. Two of
And
them, oh,
did
actually,
your
I have,
was your
sorry, go
mother
ahead.
obese too? Or no?
My mother was a size 2 or 4.
Mm.
You're kidding.
No, my mother was this petite, blonde, gorgeous, um, vivacious, thin woman who, interestingly, as a kid and as an adult, she would make comments about how big her hips were.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. But the most interesting is a reveal that happened just a few weeks ago. My mom died in June, and there were, a bazillion pictures that we, have to go through. And my sister Bonnie took a whole bunch of them and went through them and said to me, literally 2 weeks ago, she said, "You're not going to believe this. You're going to die when I show you this." She showed me a picture of my mom when she was probably 5 years old, and she was heavy. I mean, not just
Really?
chubby.
Mm.
Nobody knew this.
Mm.
Once in a while, my mother would allude to it, but we would all just be like, "Yeah, right."
Right,
Right.
right,
Because this is a woman who's saying in a size 2 or 4 that her hips are big.
right.
So, how seriously could I take her?
Right.
And
Yeah.
she's
What were you,
saying,
a
Right.
6?
"Oh,
Oh
I was
no.
right. I was
Yeah.
heavy when I was 5." The
Mm.
other interesting thing is there are no pictures of her from around that age till she's in high school,
Fascinating.
Mm.
where you could literally put your hands around her waist and your fingers would touch.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah. And she was the queen of restriction. The woman,
Oh,
Yeah.
is that what she did? I was gonna say, how did she do that? Through
she
restriction, huh?
restricted. She
Yeah.
restricted.
Mhm.
Yep, she was the queen of restriction. So I, at the age of 45, had bariatric surgery. I weighed
Oh,
225 pounds. I'm 5'1" on a good day. And so I had bariatric surgery. And I thought miraculously all of the tapes would go away. The food noise would go away. You're not good enough, pretty enough, thin
Yeah.
enough, blah, 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 would just go away. Oh no. That does not happen like that.
Right.
And so, unfortunately, I did not receive the kind of pre-op therapy,
oh,
counseling, preparation
mm.
for the surgery and for the aftermath of the surgery. So the valence went down, but it was still there. I still had noise in my head. And I lost over 100 pounds.
Wow.
And yep, yep. And still didn't think I was thin enough.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
And then began the trip of a few more pounds, just a few more pounds. And then in 2016, my dad died. And that really set it off.
Set it off.
I remember being in MGH in the cafeteria. And I remember looking at the salad that I had and saying, "I can't eat this. This is disgusting."
Hmm.
And that was the beginning of the restriction, binging, purging cycle.
Mm.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. And in 2021, ended up falling and hitting my head. And went to the emergency department, and my head was fine, thank God, but my labs were not. And I
Okay.
was basically in this death spiral. And they admitted me, kept me for 11 days before they found placement in a treatment center. Yeah. And I mean, these days, nobody stays in the
Nobody stays in the
Right.
hospital.
hospital
Right.
that
Nobody
long.
stays in the
Yeah.
Oh
hospital.
my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. They would not let me out. But here is an amazing tale. 11 days. They never put me on an eating disorder protocol.
Hmm.
So I would get a menu. I would order everything. I would eat it. I would purge, and I'd
Oh,
start all over again. I
Wow.
lost weight in the hospital. So
Wow.
yeah, it was pretty amazing. This is a major medical center. This is like, and I was visited by psych every day. So
Fascinating.
yeah,
What a failure in the system that is.
what
huge.
year was this, Melinda?
2021.
Oh my gosh. That's
Huge.
that's
Yeah,
huge.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was huge. I mean, it was just insane. And so went to treatment, didn't want to be there. I'm smart. I know the medical system. I figured out how to get out, and in 3 weeks I was out
Hmm.
and off to the races. I think I was okay for about a month, and then off to the races. I was back at it. And in 2023, basically my friends and family did an intervention and said, "We don't
Oh.
want you to die." And my PCP said to me, "You could die." And
And they did an intervention because you were back and binging and purging. Is that what you were
yeah,
at? Yeah.
they
For all
didn't
those.
know. Everyone thought I was just restricting. No one
Uh,
knew I was binging and purging. And I didn't tell anyone. And I remember walking. I was walking at the time, or maybe that was when I was the first time. Anyway, at some point I was under 100 pounds. And I very proudly said to a friend of mine, don't tell anyone, but I'm under 100 pounds. I'm so excited.
Mm.
My goal, my whole life, was to be the skinniest girl in the room.
oh,
I
Yeah.
lived to be the
that's trauma
skinniest
there
girl.
from when you were a kid,
I, always.
trying to prove to everybody you could be the thinnest person. Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That was my end goal, was always about being the skinniest girl in the room.
mhm.
And I now believe, which is a huge leap, that I was not the skinniest girl in the room. I was the sickest girl in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
And it took a long time to come to terms with that being the skinniest girl in the room was not a good thing.
Hmm.
And so anyway, intervention, went to treatment, California, and actually committed to recovery.
Oh,
And
and when
was
was the California treatment? What year?
fall of 2023, and I was there for 3 months
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
and did residential and then did a partial hospitalization program. And, you know, I think of it as a war that I'm winning, um, with an occasional battle that I lose.
Yeah.
Mm.
Right.
But overall, I'm winning the war.
Yeah.
And yeah, my mom died and I went off the rails. That was in June. And then I said, nope, I can't do this again.
Mhm.
I can't. I will die eventually, and I
Mhm.
can't do this again.
Yeah.
So, long story to how did I end up doing what I do? I realized that there was a huge deficit in weight management, and in particular, the people who were in the industry, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I started working with some pharmaceutical companies, educating their internal constituents on what weight bias was about, what obesity was about, because these were the people who were working on medications that were going to work in that area. And yet we all walk with our own biases, right? We all have
Yeah.
our own
Yeah.
sort of, and my whole philosophy is I don't care what you think. It is very hard to change how people think. What I
Right.
care is that what you do. If you sit
Right.
down on the T and you're sitting next to someone with obesity and you say to them, or you do some physical thing like, push them over
Right.
or, oh, or whatever, um, that's not okay.
Right.
Hmm.
If you have a thought that's not so nice, I can't control that, but you don't have to express it.
Right.
And
Hmm.
that's sort of when I talk to people, I say, look, and maybe the thoughts will go away at some point when your behaviors change. So there's that. And then there's the clinical trial side of it.
Mm.
And the clinical trial side is how, scientists and healthcare professionals come up with the protocols for clinical trials, right? It's not the patient, it's not the person, the provider at the end of the line who's seeing the patients. They're not coming up with the protocols. And the
Mhm.
people coming up with the protocols don't really have an insight into what does the patient really, really need. For
Mhm.
instance, how far is it from the parking lot to the clinic? Is there
Right.
valet parking? How does the patient get from the parking lot to the clinic? Is somebody going to be there to meet them and take them in a little golf cart?
Right.
Right.
Or, so what are the gowns like? What are the seats like?
Right.
What's the privacy issue?
Hmm.
All these things that don't get considered when a trial is being developed, unless somebody's saying, what about the distance to the parking lot from the parking lot to the clinic? So
Yeah.
I work with clients to do that sort of thing. And I speak on weight bias. And then this year, I'm actually speaking at two, maybe three but 2 conferences on obesity with eating disorders, because that's a huge area that's been neglected.
Right.
Everybody thinks if you're, quote, fat, a word I do not like, if you have obesity, how could you possibly have an eating disorder,
Right.
right? I mean, how is that possible? Because we all think of eating disorders as somebody who is
Skinny.
emaciated.
Yeah.
Yep.
But Melinda, do
And
you believe that an eating disorder, even when people are obese, that they have an eating disorder? Is that what you're going to say? Is it
I'm saying that,
it,
yeah,
obese people do have eating disorders, is what you're
Absolutely.
saying?
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm also going to say that the word obese is an adjective, right?
Hmm.
So an adjective defines somebody.
Hmm.
Obesity is actually a disease.
I see.
And so somebody has obesity, they're not obese. Just like you would never
Oh,
say, oh, I have a
interesting.
friend who's cancerous,
Right.
Yes, I see what
Right.
you're
right?
Oh,
saying.
You
Hmm.
fascinating.
say, I have a friend who has cancer. And so it's called people first language or person first language. And and actually, interestingly, the Diabetes Association is also trying to get away from people saying so and so's diabetic, rather so and so has diabetes.
Got it. Hmm.
So anyway, just a little bit of an aside. So yeah, it's the whole thing is so complex, and having obesity and having eating disorder, a just eating disorder, or more than one just eating disorder is actually quite common. The most common is binge eating disorder.
Hmm. Hmm.
And, when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. Not because of the weight, but because of that whole compulsion and the whole, self-stigmatization and how does it get out? What's the outlet? And, all of those kinds of things. And so I had 3. I restricted, I binged, and I purged.
Hmm. I
Yeah.
have a question. So because I work a lot with people and their childhood developmental trauma, adults, when you work with someone who's an alcoholic, one of the things we say is that they're drinking to medicate some childhood pain. People who do drugs, we could say pretty much the same, even sex addiction, that people are doing those kinds of addictive behaviors to medicate family of origin trauma. Is that the same thing, would you say, with obesity?
Well, fascinating. Great question.
Hmm.
A seriously great question. I think that that was the thinking for many, many years. That it was maybe of trauma, environmental, lack of self-control, all of those
Yep.
things. What we found, what has been discovered about obesity is there's a lot of science behind it. And a lot of it is hormonal regulation, which
Really?
gets completely screwed up. So your ability to differentiate between satiety, being full, and
Hmm.
being hungry gets completely whacked out. All of these hormones, and particularly when you're in this yo-yo diet world, your hormones go crazy. And so a lot of it is gut hormone to brain chemistry telling you the wrong thing. So there's
Interesting.
that. Plus, if there is trauma, that just, no pun intended, feeds into it. And
Right.
there's right? And then there's environmental
Yeah.
stuff, and then there's genetic
Yeah.
things. So
Yeah.
it's really complex. It's not just a one and done.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But the biggest change is the recognition that there's science behind this now. This
Hmm.
isn't just you are a bad person because you can't control what you
You're
eat.
you're
You
out of
can
control.
control.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
You're
bad
fat.
person.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly.
Indulgent. What's your problem?
Yeah, yeah,
Eat less and exercise more, right?
Right. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so that has been huge. And then the other huge piece has been the science behind all these medications,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? So all of this new regulation of your body, just like any other medication, antihypertensive or, is fascinating and hugely life altering. I mean, really life altering. the saddest part about the GLP-1s is the inability to access the medication by many people
Hmm.
because, many insurances won't cover it. And people, the people who are hit the hardest are the people who are less served and, start out with a disadvantage because they have the highest rate of obesity. And now economically, and live in food deserts and economically can't get access to the medication.
Yeah.
Right.
The other thing I'm hearing from friends who are using those medications and things is that they'll have insurance that will say okay, and it's a whole jumping through so many hoops to even get it. And then there'll be a cap on the dosage, but you need the dosage to go up in order for it to work right. Or all of a sudden they'll stop covering one of them and then they have to cover like it is, or they'll drop it all of a sudden and say, now we don't do it. And so now they've been taking it and they've started to lose weight. They've started this and then it stops. And then they gain it back. And like it, that's what I'm seeing sort of
Yeah,
boots on ground from people who in my life who are taking it, that the medical system is very challenging for these. And these are people who need it and that it really is helping them and changing their life. And it is very difficult for people to get access to.
it's huge. In Massachusetts right now, the governor is trying to stop coverage for state employees and stop coverage through Mass Health or Medicaid.
Mm.
Wow.
And that will affect
So many people.
so many
I
people.
have two friends that are on it too, and one is a former, he's retired doctor, and he's gotten all the chemicals or whatever it is for the GLP-1 and created himself and is injecting himself, doing it himself as a
Oh my
doctor.
goodness.
I know. And he's lost like 20 pounds doing it. So, and I have another friend who is on it, and they got their prescription and they went to a formulary pharmacy, and he's paying only, let's see, what is it? For 3 months, it's like $300. It's like $100 a month. And that has been working for him, and he's lost 20 pounds. I'm like, wow. So why don't people know about this?
Well, there's a danger. One is the last person you talked about is having it compounded.
Yes.
The first person you talked about, I suspect, is getting it on the gray market from China.
Yeah.
Um, and
Dangerous.
nobody knows what's in them.
That's
That's the
true.
problem. Now, absolutely, some of them are legit and some of them work. I would be a little bit more scared about the gray market.
Yes, I totally. But compounding, I think I've gone to have compounding prescriptions, and I think that's a great thing when I heard that he was doing that. So,
Well, the thing is that these medications are patented. They're not, they're not out in the public
right,
domain. So
right.
somebody has figured out, they
Yes,
think, a way to replicate them.
to compounding part, they
Oh,
figured out
Right,
some way to do it.
right.
Yes, what you're saying.
Now,
Yep.
right. And the question is, did everybody figure it out? Just some people figure it out. It's a little bit dicey. I have a friend too who's been using compounded
Hmm.
medication, and she's lost 100 pounds actually.
Oh my gosh.
Right. So clearly, she got something that works. The question I always have is, what else is in it?
Hmm.
Or what else is it doing? And that's the question that can't be answered because
Right.
nobody really knows 100% what's in it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
well,
it's a bit of a dicey decision,
and my
right?
question too with that would be the same as having a bariatric surgery. I mean, aren't you sort of susceptible to the same challenges of you take this medication and you lose this weight, but it's not, does it also stop the chatter in your brain and the habits that you have and the reasons
Right.
that you're eating in the first place? And so that's my fear about these things, and that I've looked at it and considered it and then been like, I don't know, but if I do this and then I lose a bunch of weight and I'm still struggling, this despite being in therapy and whatever, like that's a scary part to me because then it can come back even worse and we've all been to the yo-yo side, right? And so that's my concern about some of those.
Well, the good news is it seems to stop the food noise.
Interesting.
Really?
Yes, there is something that goes on between the gut and the brain that shuts it down.
Hmm.
And I've heard this from, well, there's articles, I mean, there's peer-reviewed articles about it, and I've heard it from everyone I know who's on a GLP-1. There's just, we don't really know why,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
there's something that shuts the food noise down.
Hmm.
Now, the one thing that is true is you need to stay on the medication,
Yeah, how
otherwise,
long?
for life.
For life.
Yeah, otherwise you will gain the weight back. Now, this is me. This is my thinking on
Your
this.
story,
Yeah.
okay.
This
Yeah.
is, I mean, I've never been on GLP-1, but I've studied them and there's a couple things. One is we don't have any protocols yet that I'm aware of where after you reach a healthy weight, how you're supposed to use the meds.
To
Is it
maintain.
half a dose? Is it once a month? Is it um, half a dose every 2 weeks? People are playing around with how to do a maintenance
Yeah.
dose. So that's one thing that has to happen. You know, what does on it for life mean? The second
Hmm.
thing is there are going to be new medications
Right.
Hmm.
coming down the pike.
Hmm.
The question will be, what do they do? How do they do it? And
Hmm.
what does it mean long term? Maybe
Hmm.
you don't have to be on it. Maybe you take an injection once a year,
Right.
so there's a lot of unknowns, but I think the biggest thing right now is we do know that if you come off them, you gain weight back. That
Hmm.
is like almost 100%.
Interesting. Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is
And
extra
we
scary considering the lack of consistent accessibility to it, right?
absolutely, absolutely. That is one of the biggest things. And everything you said, the change in medication, the decrease in the dose, I mean, on and on and on. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a big risk. And the other main risk of GLP-1s is the muscle mass loss.
Oh, sure.
So
Mm.
you have to be very conscientious about protein intake and exercise. And those things are important. Uh, I think that most people are willing to trade off eating more protein and doing a little bit of exercise
Right.
to lose the weight. I just,
Yeah.
we're pretty wired to do, I should only speak for myself. I was wired to do pretty much anything to lose the weight.
Right.
Hmm.
That was, I literally woke up one day, I kid you not, and I looked in the mirror, I again smacked my forehead and said, short of a brain transplant, nothing is going to change. I'm going to gain and lose and gain and lose and gain and lose, and I'm not going to live like this. And
Mm.
even then, though, I knew, and this was in 2000, I recognized that this was not just about my inability to control myself, that
Right.
this was
Hmm.
not, there was no science at
Right.
that point. There was nothing telling me, you know what, not your fault. But I knew you couldn't have hundreds of millions of people with obesity,
Right.
and all of them have no willpower.
Right. Are
It
just
made,
lazy and have no
right,
willpower,
right.
right? It's
It
just,
made no
yeah.
sense. And I would always say to people, I have one word, Oprah. This
Yes,
woman had more resources
Right.
than
Yep.
known to man, and she was unable to manage,
right. She would go up and down and up and down and up and
Absolutely.
right? I
down. Right.
mean,
And you want to, as an example of somebody who definitely is not lazy, considering she was the first female and black million billionaire.
yeah,
But
no,
she works and she goes out and she does. And so I think that's a really great point and a great example. And so for you, as you went through, I mean, obviously the intervention was enough to push you to the point of saying, okay, I'm maybe there really is and I'm ready for treatment and you've done that. And so how do you maintain now? Because it is,
Good
right?
question.
It
What do
lives
you
in
do
you
now?
forever in
Hmm.
some form. So how do you maintain that? And like you said, I mean, you sort of had it sounded like kind of a fallback in June when your mom passed, and then you were like, nope, nope. And then, so what tools do you use to maintain keeping a healthy mindset through this right now?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I have a village. I refer to it as a village. I have a therapist, I have a dietitian, and I have an eating disorder physician,
Mm.
and I have friends and family who are, intimately aware of what's going on. That's a dicey one. I'll talk about that in a minute, but my medical village, so to speak
Mhm.
to each other, which is very unusual.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
They all share what's going on with me,
Yeah.
and each of them has their own special spin, but they all are saying the same thing. Nobody contradicts each other.
Yeah.
And they all, so how do I do it? I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
That's
don't
valid.
know.
Yeah.
I
You just
don't
have
know.
to do every
I mean,
moment, every day.
yeah, sometimes I white knuckle the day. Sometimes I don't even think about it.
Right.
Um, I honestly don't know. When I get in the headspace of um, I'm going to,
Mhm.
I lately I think about how exhausting it is.
Mm.
And
Mm.
it is exhausting. I'm writing a memoir and
Mhm.
about all of this, and it is hard and it can be triggering.
I bet.
Yeah, yeah. And at the end of the day, it is just so exhausting. The planning, the executing, the aftermath. I mean, it is really, really hard. And so that's kind of what stops me.
Mm.
Mhm.
And a couple of times I've binged and I haven't purged, which
Mhm.
I
Wow.
consider a
A
victory.
Absolutely.
a
Yeah.
big win.
A real victory. And what stopped me was just that I can't do this. I
Right.
just can't do this.
Yeah.
Um, which now sort of goes backwards and to the point of I can't binge either because I just can't do this.
Yeah.
Mhm. But
So
it's
it's
living with the consequences. You've lived with them long enough and what it's cost you. You're just like, maybe there's some place in yourself that's going, I'm not doing this. I'm done with this. It's too exhausting. And sometimes it wins. And like you said, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't, but the sometimes it doesn't is, you know,
Few and far between.
long
Yep.
distances,
Very, very long. Yeah, which is
long
great. To me,
distances.
that's recovery.
Yeah,
To tell you the
yeah,
truth. I
Right.
mean,
yeah.
I look at people, when you're an alcoholic, does that mean you'll never, like drink again? Sometimes you do, and you fall off the wagon, but then you get back on. It's really the understanding that I can't live with these consequences, what it does to me, and it's so painful, I'm not going to do it. So you kind of learn to live with that, and it kind of drives the ship rather than I'm going to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, the other thing is I had a learned behavior restriction
Right.
my
Yeah.
whole life. So that was like not a new behavior. I didn't sort of come up with that one.
Hmm.
It was my whole life that I
Hmm.
was supposed to restrict. And then, then I got fancy and added the other two. And the three together, lethal.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Just lethal.
Yeah.
So I'm very open about it. I don't mean that I go out and start talking to people
Right.
willy-nilly about this. No,
In
I
the
say
line of
no,
the
that line at
grocery
Whole
store.
yeah,
Foods.
yeah, right. Hey, did you know? No, no, no. But I mean, if someone asks me something,
Mhm.
I have no,
Mhm.
when I had surgery, I never denied it. I never, told anybody, oh,
Yeah.
no, or, oh, but don't tell anyone. I didn't care.
Right.
Um, you know, Maybe behind it was interesting. People were like, oh, good, like, what a brave thing, or, good for you for making a decision. Maybe behind the backs, they said, oh, she took the easy way out, but I don't
Mm.
care.
Right. Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
I didn't care. Um, so yeah,
I have a
it is,
question
yeah.
to ask you. So, how? do you know the statistics on the many people who have obesity and diabetes? Because isn't that on the rise? Isn't
Oh, yeah.
diabetes really growing in the United States? I don't know about the world.
Yeah, it is. Actually, it's growing in the world too. I don't know the statistic, but what we do know is that the comorbidity of diabetes and obesity with obesity is
Yep,
huge.
it's huge.
Type 2 diabetes.
Type
When
2, right?
yeah, when
Not
you
type
have
1. Mhm.
right, when you have obesity, the odds are very high, depending upon what your BMI is, that you will develop type 2 diabetes. And but the other interesting thing is if you lose weight,
It goes away?
yes.
Interesting.
In a large portion of patients, the diabetes goes away and the hypertension goes away. And if it doesn't go away completely, it's very easily managed.
So I can't
Um,
believe insurance companies don't want to pay for that because when people get diabetes, they're going to be paying a lot for all the medical care they need.
yeah, I know. Insurance companies are funny. Not ha ha. Um, they will say, well, we only have people on average 5 years, like because people in the workforce move around. And
Oh,
so we never see the benefit of the long term. But you know what? When you look at the state and the feds, people stay in those systems for life.
Right.
And you would think
yes.
that at least those two, the feds actually do pay. I don't know if they pay for all of the meds or if they've picked just a couple, but I know that they were paying. Um, you would think that those two systems would be clamoring to pay.
Really.
You
It just,
know,
it's crazy. And you know, did you heard about RFK and what he was talking about for medical schools? Did you hear that news?
no,
Robert
not sure.
Kennedy, he is now talking to all the, I guess it's US medical schools about teaching more about nutrition and diet and during their medical school experience. That
Oh,
that's just
yeah,
that just hit the news a couple days ago, and I was thinking, well, I think that's a good thing. You
that
know,
is a good
That
thing.
should be
most
happening anyway.
it should
That's
be, but it's not.
yeah,
No,
yeah,
it's not. No, and they should be learning more about weight bias and obesity and all of those.
Yes, that's where it should be. Exactly.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. No,
yeah.
absolutely. It's it is an area that the bias has gotten a little better,
Hmm.
but
It's still there.
it's still there. It's still a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
And the worst is with kids.
Mm,
Yes.
The
Oh, they're
bullying
brutal.
is brutal,
yeah.
is right. I mean,
Yeah.
cruel. And
Yeah.
the other problem is that childhood obesity is on the rise
Yes.
in a big
Yes.
way.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's tough. And eating disorders are on the rise. Eating disorders are the second leading cause of death in the mental health illness category,
Oh my
just
goodness.
Really? Wait a
behind,
minute.
just
What was that?
behind eating disorders are the second highest cause of death in mental health illness
You're kidding because they have a heart
behind
attack?
behind opioids. Suicide.
Suicide.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, suicide and the disease itself.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. The
Wow.
second leading cause of mental health illness,
Hmm.
Wow.
just behind opioids,
Hmm.
which is really, and the number one population
Women.
with eating disorders,
Right.
obesity,
Oh.
people with obesity.
Hmm. Sure. People with
Yeah.
obesity, not the
And
skinny
this
ones
is,
with
yeah,
anorexia and all that stuff, but it's the obesity. Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, when you think about it, at 225 pounds, I was still restricting and I was binging. I wasn't purging so much then, but I was restricting and binging. Um, yeah, my repertoire expanded in 2016.
Yeah.
Um,
So, Melinda, what would you recommend for listeners of this podcast for resources or what what kind of treatment can they get? Like what is that whole area for you?
Right. I think the number one thing is if you have obesity and you want to talk to someone about how to if you want to manage it, if you want to do something in the weight management world, which you don't have to do, but if you do, you need to find a weight management clinician,
Mm-hmm.
somebody who specializes. Because unfortunately, most PCPs, while they may be aware of treatment, they're not aware of the whole spectrum usually.
Right.
And they're not specialized, so they're not able to really talk about in depth the whole process, the risks, the benefits, just like you would go to a cardiologist.
Yeah,
If your PCP heard a heart murmur, that the PCP wouldn't be treating the heart murmur.
right.
So it's the same sort of thing. So I would say anybody who's interested in just finding out about weight management, they go to a weight management specialist. Unfortunately, they're not thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of them. So it's hard sometimes. So you need to find in your area somebody who is at least familiar
Right.
with, who may say, my subspecialty is this, and if you have diabetes, an endocrinologist who,
Hmm.
treats diabetes and obesity. So there are ways of, trying to figure out who might be appropriate.
Hmm.
If you have eating disorders, there's an organization called NEDA, National Eating Disorder Association. I think that's what it stands for. And then if you go online, there's a whole lot of resources,
Hmm.
for people with eating
Hmm.
disorders. I think the most important thing is, just like with anything else, recognizing that there's something here that needs to be managed.
Yeah.
Right.
That there's
Right.
something, because I can tell you, I didn't care how many times somebody said to me, you look sick, you're too thin, you're wasting away, whatever they said, I mean, it was endless. My friends were brutal. I mean, they were
Mm.
brutal. And until I came to terms with, I mean, I was supposed to go to Morocco. And I remember saying to everybody, well, when I get back from Morocco, if I'm still not okay, I'll go to treatment. I mean, really, I'm going to get better in Morocco. Like that's yeah, that's
You
not
needed to
going
go
to
to the
happen.
hospital in Morocco. Good luck.
Exactly. That is so not happening. So everyone looked at me and went, really? And then, as I said, there was an intervention. I remember we came back from the beach. My two sisters were in the car, and both of them started crying and said, you can't die. You can't die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I, something actually that impacted me, but a switch flipped. I was home, I was purging, and all of a sudden I became hysterical.
Mm.
I just started crying and crying and like, what am I doing? What am I doing? And that was it. That was when I said, I'm not going to Morocco.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so I mean, really, you started realizing how you were treating yourself, like you're loving the self is
Right.
has to do with that I matter, I'm valuable, and then all of a sudden you're up against, look what I'm doing to myself, and is this what I want to be doing? And
yeah,
it's very
yeah,
touching. Yeah, I think more people need to have this compassion for self and love, and when they start seeing that they're coming to the edge of killing themselves with
Yeah.
eating disorders. That's a great, that was a great insight. Somehow, I don't know, a touch of whatever people believe in God or divine, something changed.
yeah. Something changed. I mean,
Yeah.
I will never know,
Mhm.
what, but I will never forget that moment
I
of
can't do
just,
that.
and
Hmm.
it was
Awesome.
a 180 from what I felt every other time I purged, which
Hmm.
was absolute peace and calm. It was the best drug ever.
Mm.
I
Wow.
mean, the best drug ever.
That's amazing.
For a nanosecond, I had this absolute quiet calm with the world.
Mm.
And it lasted a nanosecond. And if it wasn't enough, I'd do it again
Yeah.
until it was enough. That same night, that same,
Wow. Yeah.
and until it was enough.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was the whole thing. You know, having this large body and all of the things that went on with that, feeling, I mean, the relationships with men, a
Hmm.
disaster, a disaster. Nothing, I didn't feel like I had self-worth. So how could I possibly pick someone who
Right.
said
Hmm.
you're worthy?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So I picked people who were the opposite. You're not worthy, or I don't mean abuse physically, but psychologically, I can take advantage of you.
Right.
I was never in a physically abusive relationship. Um, but, going from that to the other extreme and still having feelings of I'm not worthy because I'm not the skinniest
Yes.
girl in the
Yeah.
room.
Right.
Oh dear. But see, there's some other wiser part of you that had to have come forward in that moment when you
Yeah.
decided that, and that's what
Yeah,
we're all looking for to find and to cultivate more. And somehow that happened for you, to
Yeah.
save your life in some ways,
yeah,
Melinda.
no, yeah, to save my life, period.
Period. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. And so, when I speak, so I think I said I was speaking at a couple of conferences. I'm speaking at it's ASMBS, it's the surgical organization in this country for bariatrics and metabolic surgery.
Mhm.
So there's like four main organizations that kind of manage the obesity world. There's ASMBS surgery, TOS research, ABOM, which is medicine, so the medical management, and then the OAC, the Obesity Action Coalition, which I was on the board of, which is the peer organization. We represent and advocate for people affected by obesity. And so those are the four main organizations that manage the obesity world. So I'm speaking at ASMBS. And then I was also invited, there's a world conference on obesity and weight management here in Boston in October. And I don't know how they found me, but they did. And so I'm
That's
speaking
great.
to that. Yeah. And it's all on obesity with eating disorders.
Wow.
Hmm.
So,
Wow.
and I may be speaking at TOS, the research
Wow.
organization.
That's
Somebody
great.
asked me if I
Yeah.
would do it, and I haven't heard from them yet, but I
Yeah.
said, of course. So, I'm the voice of the patient, but I also have this medical background. So it's,
Yes.
kind of an
Right.
interesting mix. And
Yeah.
they're all
Good
panels.
mix.
So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting.
That's
It's really
great.
amazing. And somebody who's affected by obesity and have been my whole life as well, like, thank you for doing that work and for being that voice and being out there, because every human on the planet, whatever they're struggling with, needs an advocate somewhere. And having that and knowing that you exist and you're in these rooms and you're having these conversations and you're going to these panels, I mean, that's a really big deal, to be doing that, especially to do it from a lived experience perspective. And so I love that you're talking about it. And, I'm just
Thank you.
thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing here and for sharing there and doing this work that you're doing.
And thank you for reaching out to me, Melinda, to want to do this. Not some people are like very shy or say,
Yeah.
oh, I would never do something like that. So thank you
Oh,
but I see
yeah.
you're very passionate about it. So it's great.
Yeah, no, I thank you really, truly. Because as I said, I think that this is a really, really important, these are important topics and
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
people need to depersonalize.
Hmm.
Yeah.
They need to depersonalize them. It's not about the individual. It never was.
Right.
Hmm.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, thank
thank
you.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you like what you've heard, please share it with friends, subscribe, and leave a review.
And remember, information shared on this podcast is not medical advice. If you have a concern about your physical or mental health, please seek support from a professional.
If you have a story you'd like to share about things your mother forgot to mention, you can apply to be a guest.
We'd also love to hear a quick 90-second thing you've learned in your life.
You can find links to both of those over at our website at
thingsmymotherforgottomention.com or in the show notes.
Thank you.